Hello and welcome to Some of My Friends Read Comics. We've got Vince.
The only one who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man.
Chris.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Chris had nothing. Hi, I'm Kia. Welcome to the show. And we have a guest today. Oh, it's my good friend up here in New York City, Rob. How you doing, Rob?
I'm living the goddamn dream, brother. What's up, man?
Very good. Good to have you here, sir. Today we are talking about a little comic called Preacher. Season 2 of the TV show just started on AMC, and we very sadly neglected the show during its premiere, so we figured why not go back and read some Preacher comics. Guys, have any of us actually sat down to watch the TV show yet?
I have not. I like the main actor on it, Howard Stark. I don't know, is Dominic something?
That's right, yeah, he's the guy who plays Howard Stark in the TV shows, yeah. And Chris, you haven't either, have you?
No, I was reading about the first season summary, and it sounds very interesting in that it's not like this comic.
Really? Okay, so maybe we might read some more Preacher in the future and come revisit it after we've taken a look at the show here. But this gives us a chance to just sit down here. Oh, really? You're not excited? All right, we'll get to all that. So Preacher is a comic from the mid-'90s from the Vertigo imprint, DC's Vertigo imprint, which had, of course, Sandman, Transmetropolitan. I'm sometimes hard on superhero comics in the '90s, but I feel like Vertigo really kind of hit their stride and had some really cool stuff. If you only read Vertigo comics in the '90s, I think you'd be okay. Is that a controversial statement?
Even through like the mid-2000s, like Vertigo is what got me into comics. Like I liked Spider-Man before, but I think Kia, I asked you like when I started trying to get into comics in mid-2000s, I was like, what should I read? And you were like, Why the Last Man from Vertigo. And then every Vertigo book I read was pretty darn good. So that's why I gravitated towards Preacher, and I actually ended up reading all of Preacher. But I can't remember a lick of it. I read it a decade ago. But, so it stuck with me, clearly. But I remember, like, because this and Sandman were, like, their big 90s books, I think. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Hellblazer.
Yeah. And Hellblazer.
Yeah,
Constantine.
And correct me if I'm wrong, was Hellboy on them, too?
Hellboy was... What's that? Is that...
Dark Horse, right?
Dark Horse?
Dark Horse. Okay. See, that's what I feel like. Vertigo and Dark Horse in the '90s were sort of they were vying for the Marvel at DC of the '90s. I feel like both of those books came of age and came into their own in relatively the same amount, same decade, same time.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a good era.
And Image is really taken over a lot of that, kind of on both sides. Like they do kind of the darker superhero stuff, but then they also do books like this today.
Yeah, which is good. I'm definitely happy for Vertigo because they kind of opened the doors for comics to just do a lot of different things. It was basically all superheroes at this point. I'm sure there was other stuff out there that nobody was reading, but they made it big where you could kind of do anything. And so Preacher is one of these creator-owned stories where we should talk about the creators a little bit. Garth Ennis, the writer, and Steve Dillon, the artist. The two of them together, we talk about them a lot on the show because they did one of the best Punisher runs of all time. Really brought that character into the limelight again. And other than that, I don't really think I've read a lot of other Garth Ennis stuff.
You don't need to read a lot. You don't need to read much more Garth Ennis beyond. Chris was texting me
a little one note.
He did Preacher, and then he did the spinoff, the sort of spinoff of one of the characters from Preacher.
Kev, right? Is that it? Or no, that's a different one.
The Saint of Killers.
That's right. Yeah.
Kev is from Authority.
Kev is from the Authority. You're right. I'm sorry. I messed up.
No,
I have read those and I like them.
Chris was he also did Hitman, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So Chris
I've read more of his than I know, but it does always tend to be like killing people as violently as possible. I think that's kind of the draw with the Garth Ennis book, right?
He never resists an opportunity for somebody to stick their own dick in their mouth. So between this and the Punisher, because I remember the director of Punisher Warzone, Lexi Alexander. She was on How Did This Get Made, and she was talking about, I don't want to make a Punisher movie. That sounds awful. And then she's like, they gave me a Garth Ennis comic, and the first page is a guy saying, the Punisher telling him, was like, if you don't tell me what I need, then I'm going to cut your dick off and stick it in your mouth. And then on the second page, the Punisher did that, and I'm like, oh, I get this movie. I'm gonna make it now.
Yeah, I mean that's a Garth Ennis comic in a nutshell. Like, it's very overt about what you're getting, and I think honestly that's kind of its strength, because this whole comic is sort of like, I mean, in painting it in grand tones, it's like a search for God and the battle between heaven and hell. And another writer I could see taking this and doing it like as more of a mystery, where it's like, oh,
Gaiman.
What's that?
I said Gaiman. I mean, in reading.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, if Neil Gaiman was doing this, it would be a lot like Sandman, kind of ethereal. Like, oh, what is this? What's going on? Whereas Garth Ennis just comes right in and says, okay, yeah, no, an angel fucked a demon, and they had this weird abomination of a baby, and now it's escaped heaven, and it has possessed a preacher, and he's gonna use his new powers as he walks around the country looking for God. Like, that's a hook. That's got a damn hook to it. Can you hook me on Sandman in one word? No. Well, maybe not one word. I don't know about that. Anyway, yeah, you probably could. I don't know. It's just not the same. It doesn't have that that sort of instantly grabs you, that fun factor. I don't know. Maybe I think that's what this book has that I really enjoy, the fun factor, where it just doesn't care and it wants to go, let's just get into it, man. Let's get into it.
Well, you guys you guys were doing quotes from the book that you liked?
Sometimes at the beginning. What part was your quote from, Vince?
Oh, it was just a song.
Oh, was it,
the only one
that's right.
who could ever teach me.
Yeah, we didn't do that. Usually, it's like something fun to start off the show with, or it's not important. But yeah, if there's anything in particular, like a segment you liked as we're going through, just like, yeah, throw it out there. But let me start getting us into the comic a little bit here. We start off with our main characters kind of sitting around a diner, getting on the same page. The whole first issue is a little bit of a flashback. We meet our main character, Jesse Custer. He's a preacher at a church in a small town in Texas. What's it called? Allentown?
Anvil.
What was Anvil?
Anvil. Yeah, because
I just realized
this is a funny comic. I guess
it's spelled like Ann, like A-N-N-E Ville, but I just got the
like,
I got
I didn't really connect that. I guess reading it, I never said it out loud.
It's like Diagon Alley from Harry Potter. Yep.
It's like Diagon Alley. Oh, diagonally. I just got that. All right.
Oh, and he's a bishop on that chessboard.
So one night Jesse just kind of gets fed up with everything. He goes to the bar and he's like telling everybody about all the sins they've been confessing. Like, oh, what is it? And you come confess and you think it's okay. Like, kind of going off on everybody. And the next morning, of course, everyone shows up at church. They're like, oh my God, did y'all hear what the preacher did? And that's when this big old spirit of Genesis shoots down like a fireball, gets into his body, and the whole town goes up in flames. Meanwhile, the other two characters have been doing their own thing. Tulip, she, I guess, was putting a hit out on some guy, which went poorly. She did not kill him. She's running away, and luckily Cassidy is sitting there in his pickup truck, and they drive off together. Cassidy, spoiler alert, is a vampire. They get into that a little bit later, but just for ease of an audio podcast, he's a vampire. So he does stuff like sleep in the back of the truck during daylight, because vampires have to do that. But, do most vampires own pickup trucks? Is that a good way to get around?
He's also British. He's also your classic 90s Vertigo. Yeah, he's British.
Oh,
I thought he was Irish.
Okay, sorry.
Gutter British.
Yeah, he's like gutter. Yeah, like a gutter punk, a real crusty punk kind of fellow.
Which has never been seen in a Vertigo comic ever.
Which is interesting because it like before you know it, you start reading, he actually looks a little and sounds a little bit like Constantine. And for a hot second, I was like, oh, is this sort of like a crossover? Before like I knew that they had made this character who he was. I was like, oh, this is Constantine.
Yeah, he feels a lot like Constantine though. Just put Constantine in this book, and it's pretty much the same book.
Yep.
I forgot that he was British or Scottish or Irish or whatever. I knew, but I had forgotten about it. And the book doesn't really, like, every once in a while you get like a word like bloke or something like that, and you're like, oh yeah, but it's never important. It's just one of those details. A lot of those Vertigo authors really liked, where it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the kind of, yeah, I see, that kind of guy.
Even the foreword acknowledges that. I think Garth Ennis is British or Irish, and the foreword's like, I'm from Texas, and he don't know how we talk in Texas, so that's kind of funny. But
no,
yeah. Wait a minute, are we all from Texas? Rob, you're from Houston, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but
we are all Texas boys here. Look at that.
Well, I mean, I'm not a native Texan at all.
Yeah,
Get the fuck out.
But me and Chris are still in Texas, you Yankee boys, which comes up in issues 5 through 7.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. So these two, Tulip and Cassidy the vampire, they're driving along. Cassidy's sleeping in the back, and Tulip sees this big old fireball from the church, so she goes to investigate, and lo and behold, what does she find? It's her ex-boyfriend, Jesse. Oh, man. Fun coincidence right there. And she decides, okay, I'm going to take him, and we're going to get to safety. Then the cops show up. These racist ass fucking cops. Like, oh my god.
And that's where my favorite line comes in.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'll let you read it.
It's kind of in the middle. It's right after. It's the panel where the cops are investigating the town, what has just happened, and the sheriff, the head sheriff, Sheriff Root or whatever. He let me see. He says, hang on. Martian niggers, and then he spits, and that's I broke out laughing because I thought that was the most perfect, like, Texan, like, quintessential. It'd be like if Quentin Tarantino had filmed a racist Texas cop, and this is his dialogue.
Yeah,
Martian niggers.
And as he gets into it, it's just like, oh my, like they always spell out, he's talking about the FBI, and it's always spelled out FBI.
Yeah.
Like they're sending these Martians from space, and the government's trying to cover them up, and that's what's going on here.
Like, that's a character right out of a Tarantino picture.
Yeah, and you instantly know who this guy is, and you're just like, all right, this is the world we're living in. Okay. It's just like, he kept going though. Like he uses that N-word over and over, and I'm like, geez.
And that's why I was like, wow. And it jumped me back to finding out when this book was written and by whom, because I think both of, like I said, the 90s was one of those eras where, you know, it was a little more gully. The comic book industry was a little more like cutthroat. It felt like, you know, you could make a book and do and say things like this and not be dragged over the coals for it or be considered provocateur.
Well, it's also the 90s where cops can say the N-word for humor. Also,
word.
Yeah.
I mean, and I guess get into where this book lost me was this book really, really wants to like offend some like, you know, housewife that accidentally started looking at her son's comic. And so like it's so much of it is just like shock factor stuff, and I'm just like, okay, but like I don't care. Like I don't care about all the like where's God stuff. Like I saw Dogma, like okay, you know, like
this predates Dogma though.
It does, but I didn't care about it in Dogma either.
So here's what going back into this, I was kind of worried because I'm not big on, I guess, religious fiction, you can call it. I don't want to already have to know all the ins and outs of another story in order to be able to enjoy this one. And I like that he kind of didn't go into too much detail about religion and the structure of a particular religion. It was just like, okay, you got heaven, you got hell, they're at war.
So are you saying you like that he didn't talk about Dogma?
I guess so. I don't know. I think he gave us just enough for the religion, and I know it's like a shock value thing, but for me that's just like, maybe I'm numb to it, but it's like another element of the story, and I'm kind of on board just to see what this power is that he's got now.
Yeah.
I don't think you understood that was a joke I made, but
I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know the religious stuff well enough to realize that. My bad, Chris.
So when Dogma is a system of religious rules.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought you were talking about the movie. Something. Okay. My bad.
that's the joke.
Okay. All right, Chris. Vince, go ahead.
So when I first read this book 10 years ago, I did not really like all the angel shit. I was like, this is boring. This time around, I was like, this is fine. I don't like dudes with terrible mohawks, as they all do, and they all look like fucking loser angels, and they're the Seraphi or the Adelphi, and now I'm like, oh, they're supposed to be losers. Oh, I get it. I think I didn't get that the first time.
There's like two classes of angels. There's like the smart science ones, and there's the warlike ones.
I think there's more than two. I feel like the hierarchy of the angelic core is not unlike that of, say, what's that show with the two brothers who hunt, Supernatural.
Yeah. Which is also very much a Vertigo TV show. Writ large. Yeah. That thing is ripped off Constantine like hardcore. There's a Constantine plot. It is in Supernatural. But I like Supernatural. It's a good show.
So here, seeing these angels, all I know right now is that you've got your jock angels who are in charge and the kind of nerdy ones who are a little bitter about the whole thing. And you know what? I identify. I'm on board. You know.
And then you have your specialist angels like the Saint of Killers.
Right. So they've got to go find the Saint of Killers so that he can go and get Genesis. That's what they're calling the kid of the angel and the demon. Genesis is this thing with massive power, and the Saint of Killers has to go find Genesis and get shit taken care of, right?
Well, yeah, because Jesse, I don't know if we said Jesse Custer has got the power of the Word of God, so he can just.
Yeah, I was just about to get into that. Go for it, though.
He's possessed by God, or basically a godlike being, because we'll figure out what happened to God later, and so the angel's like, fuck, this cannot be on Earth. Like, this could wreck everything. So that's why they hire the Saint of Killers, who's like a cowboy, but not the weird shadowy John Wayne that's also talking to Jesse in his head.
Yeah, let's get this out of the way right now. Throughout these issues, John Wayne shows up to talk to Jesse Custer. Apparently, they've been talking since Jesse was a kid. John Wayne just reached his hand out from the TV and said, hey, we're talking now. We don't know exactly what that's all about in the first 7 issues. I assume we'll find out later, but yeah.
It's throughout the whole book.
Do we find out exactly why?
I don't remember. But it's not a plot. It's not something that's forgotten. I tell you that.
It definitely confused me at the beginning because there's 2 cowboys running around, and I thought one was the other at one point. Yep. So I was like, "What? What's that guy?" Yeah, me too, a little weird. But yeah, so this Saint of all Killers. So Jesse's got this power of the Word of God. He uses it to get the cops off their backs. He's like, "Drop the guns, let us go," and they have to obey. That's his power. He can use his voice to make people do anything he wants them to. And so after they're still hanging around investigating, that's when the Saint of Killers shows up. That's our cliffhanger for issue 1. Leads right into issue 2, where he shows no mercy, kills all the cops dead, violently, terribly.
Except for Sheriff Root.
Sheriff, who gets to go report it all back to his boss, like an idiot.
He is definitely like an 80s movie, like Jackie Gleason, like Smokey and the Bandit, Boss Hogg, like, confounded! Oh my God, these Nartians and the FBI is investigating us. Like, that voice came through, at least to me.
That definitely did, yeah. So they're dealing with all that, and the cops are kind of talking about it later, like, oh my God, this is insane, and nobody is really believing it until more of this stuff starts to happen, and the cops, start to follow a trail. Meanwhile, they're buying Jesse some new clothes in a mall. We get a little bit more backstory from Tulip and Cassidy. Tulip's kind of hanging out because she wants to know Jesse dumped him all those years ago and became a minister. Cassidy the vampire is hanging around because, hey, it's something interesting, right? Why not? Everybody gets in a fight outside of a bar with some hoodlums. And, oh, my God, Cassidy starts sucking their blood. He's a vampire. And at the beginning of the next issue, we're kind of blazing through. That's all right. We'll talk about it all later. But they say, bye, vampire, and they head over to a motel to clean up a little bit. Meanwhile, now the cops are hearing about this bar fight, and they call Sheriff Hugo. It's part of his, crime. They've had some witnesses say that folks looked like those other 3 that got away. And, we should take this moment to talk about Sheriff Hugo's son. Sheriff Hugo, we come to learn, has a terrible, terrible life where, what exactly happened to this poor kid? Okay, so his mom... Oh, boy.
I don't remember what happened to his mom.
The most depressing story you can think of. All right, go for it, Vince.
I don't remember what happened to his mom, but his son was really into Kurt Cobain, and after Kurt Cobain killed himself, his son shot himself in the face as well, but didn't kill himself. So his face looks like a butthole.
Ass face.
He's called
Arse-face.
Arse-face because that's what Cassidy names him. And I'm like, no Texan boy is going to name himself Arse-face. He's going to call himself Asshole Face or Butthole Face. Or
Yeah.
And it's a hilarious joke about a real kid that did this. So
really?
I guess.
I know Arse-face is in the TV show. I know that.
Yeah, well, but they made him like some more of a sympathetic, like real character and not a punchline, which is what he is in this book.
He becomes more of a villain, I think, as the book goes on.
Sympathetic character, because after this sort of like, a chunk of his brain's been taken out, he's like just filled with so much glee, and he just wants to talk to his dad, and his dad is just like hating his life. And will not speak a word to his son at all. And so, yeah, I really did feel for him. I, at the beginning, definitely thought of him as a punchline, but I was kind of surprised with how quickly it went to being just a little bit more than that. But I can definitely still, it does make me cringe a little bit that, like, it's like, all right, it does feel like you're kind of exploiting this type of situation a little, but I guess that's Garth Ennis for you. He's going to make you cringe.
So so he'll end up becoming a villain later in the book.
Yeah.
Much later.
And I always like seeing a villain's path to villainhood. I think I like seeing that sympathetic villain. I like seeing what's going on their side of things. But anyways, the cops hear about this bar fight. They go. Sheriff Hugo sneaks into the car with him to head out there. Cassidy, meanwhile, also heads over to the bar to kind of see what's going on over there now. And he meets the Saint of Killers, who have shot the whole place up. Shoots up Cassidy, of course, before leaving. Don't worry, Cassidy's fine. He's a vampire. He's just going to suck some blood. He'll be okay. And then Sheriff Hugo finds Jesse and Tulip at the motel. Now there's like a bit of a standoff. Tulip's going after him. And pretty much everybody comes back at once. Saint of Killers shows up. He's dealing with the sheriff. Cassidy shows up and drives a car right into the Saint of Killers, which of course doesn't hurt him at all. And then Arse-face runs out. Don't kill my dad. And Jesse tells everyone to stop. He uses his word. He makes the Saint of Killers bring his angel bosses down because he wants some answers. I thought this was one of the funniest moments of the books, where one of those loser angels shows down and puts on this great big show of like, oh, I'm an angel coming down from heaven, and Jesse just uses the word like, man, just cut the bullshit, and you just see his regular puny, shitty Mohawk self. Then Jesse tells the angels to get lost after he gets the information he needs, and he orders Sheriff Hugo to fuck himself. And Vince, your favorite part of the book, we later find out that Sheriff Hugo's penis, his severed penis, is in his colon.
It's an artist's signature. Yeah. It's an artur's signature.
Yeah, the signature penis being ripped off and stuck inside your own body.
The Garth
Ennis specialty.
The Garth Ennis touch. I bet you The Boys has that. I'm just gonna bet you. I haven't read The Boys. Somebody's dick gets cut off and put in one of their own orifices. I'm betting you. I'd bet good money.
So meanwhile, this Sheriff Hugo boy, he's at a new low point. He finally says to his son, "Hey, son." He's like, "Oh my God, my dad's finally talking to me." He says, "Hand me my gun over there," and he blows his own brains out in front of his son, which of course sets Arse-face on the road to becoming a villain. We get the crew. They're going out of town. They're driving away as far as they can, and that's the end of the first 4 issues. There. Now we did read the first 7 to kind of like see where this thing was going. That's where the first trade originally had him collected. But 5 through 7 is just kind of like a weird mini adventure in New York City. I didn't really expect them to go so far away, so far from Texas. I was like, oh, cool. They're in New York now. Cool. Naming streets and actually getting a little bit of geography correct. I'm like, okay, yeah, Christopher Street. That is where the gay people hang out. That makes sense. We don't really need to go too far into this story and all the details of it because I think we've got the gist of the book here. But there's something that bugs me about this because they go to visit like this old reporter friend of Cassidy's. Meanwhile, there's a parallel storyline where the cops are investigating a murder. And eventually we'll find out, okay, it's this reporter buddy that is the murderer. And he tries to frame Cassidy for it by sending the police to his own apartment while Cassidy is there. And I'm just thinking, that's a bad idea, linking yourself to these crimes in any way at all. It doesn't seem like a good plan at all. So I did not like this
I
last
think
read.
what happened was the sleazy reporter guy, Cy, he was like, fuck, I've got too many dead bodies in my house. This is too much effort to move them. I'm going to invite my vampire friend over and say, hey, he was like squatting at my house, chilling. I was out of town. I was in Maryland or whatever for the last 3 months.
For how long? For how long?
And the vampire put all these bodies in here. It wasn't me. And oh, by the way, I helped the cops solve a different crime. So therefore, I'm because he was going to send the cops that were trying to investigate the serial killer. He was going to send Jesse Custer, who's wanted, because obviously he's killed a lot of people as well. They were going to send him to those cops and like, hey, also, in addition to definitely not being a serial killer, wink, 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 I helped find this preacher killer for you guys. So let's just let it all go, right? I think that was his plan.
His plan doesn't make any sense. It's all built around the shocking surprise of him being the killer because they try to set it up like the cop is the killer. Which I'm obviously he has a dark secret or whatever.
There's that cop who like is always talking about how much he hates gays and is like pointing at them like, oh, those damn gays ruining the neighborhood. And then the other shocking twist is that, oh, this guy turns out to be gay himself and he hasn't been doing his job catching criminals, which, I mean, neither of those really surprised me at all. I was like, okay, maybe it's just because I know Garth Ennis' writing style and you can kind of see it all coming a little bit. But it didn't really, I don't know. It didn't. The one detail I loved is that when
I personally think that's what this book suffered from the most. Its sort of predictability in the scope of its storyline. It's not to say that these characters aren't compelling and there isn't some a level of human depiction that is cool, but at the end of the day, it became like every other thing like this that you've read, except not as good.
I'm with you. I was very intrigued by this premise and what I thought we might see, where it's a combination of an angel and a demon, and it's now inside of a human. So this human is going to represent the good and the evil that are inside of all of us. And what would you do if you had this sort of immense power? Like, the book kind of got my brain going on thoughts like that, and then I got to this next little storyline, and I'm like, oh, so it's just going to be this? Okay, well, maybe. And I think maybe that's why I didn't really get into it too far the first time around. Like, I tried reading this ages ago, and I don't really remember why I stopped. And I'm thinking maybe that's it. Maybe it just kind of turned out to be these little unimportant storylines that were just shock value.
This is a classic comic book thing, though, where you come out guns a-blazing with, like, your first big arc, and then you do a small arc immediately after that. Like, Runaways does that with a, like, 2-issue, like, throwaway vampire arc right after its first big arc. Like, that doesn't matter. I think Why the Last Man probably does the same. Swamp Thing definitely did, where it's just like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, I like the first 4 issues. Like, you're just killing time now. I like this.
Get back into it, right?
I liked this, but
it's what in anime they call the filler episode.
Right.
Yeah.
I liked this though, but I think it's because there's a Punisher arc that's identical to this. I feel like those cops are straight out of a Punisher story that Ennis and Dillon are going to do about 5 years later. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I think they are.
Those cops feel very, very like. Here's what Ennis. I don't want to say he's good at writing sort of sad, down on their luck characters, but he is good at just making them as sad and down on their luck as he possibly can, and just making people look pathetic. Like, in his Punisher run, he's got Detective Soap, who got like poor stuff that happened to that guy.
That's who I was thinking of, Detective Soap, because that's exactly what this like unluckiest cop in the world was.
It feels exactly like that. So there's a lot of similarities you can really see throughout all his work.
I actually liked this arc better than the first arc, though, because this arc we got more kind of from Cassidy, like his backstory, and we also got the kind of, the setup for what's going to be the kind of long running subplot of, like, Tulip and Preacher, and like, are they going to get together, or like, what's the deal?
I gotta be honest, I fucking hate that. I like the whole Tulip and whether or not they're gonna get it seems very Dawson's Creekian to me in a way that I'm like, I'm 30 plus years old. this is not compelling to me.
Well, and it's also and it's also
part
creepy because he's still wearing his preacher stuff. It's like, I'm gonna fuck you in 3 days tops.
Yeah, like the fuck, man.
Yeah,
it's absurd.
It was definitely absurd.
I did like Cassidy, and I like that that's at least setting up what the story is going to be. So I'm like, okay, well, like Tulip has some story that she hasn't told, so that's at least interesting. I do wish, because like from the beginning, and this book really turned me off because I'm like, Jesse Custer's just an asshole the whole book. Yeah. Like from the first issue when he's like, oh, I'm truth telling. It's like, no, you're not. You're just being
you're being an asshole. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is like he didn't have a journey from being like a good preacher to like you know, like a roguish like bad preacher. Like that never happened. He was always a shithead and somehow became a preacher, still was a shithead, and is still now a shithead. It never really changes from that. And I think that's what turned me off the first time I read this book. I think now knowing that, oh, that's just who Jesse Custer is, I'm like, I deal with it a lot better, recognizing that he has no past journey. Like the idea that I don't know how he reformed to become a preacher, because he always seemed like a shithead before he was a preacher. Yeah. And in this story.
Yeah. One of the things you always talk about, Vince, that bothers you, which I'm picking up on now, you know, you always talk about, you know, characters not just looking into stuff. And Preacher, I don't think he actually makes a decision in the entirety of these 7 issues that I've read. He just kind of like falls into everything and goes wherever he's pushed. It seems like a weird thing for your main character to do.
And that's why I had a hard time like getting into it the first time. There are a few moments that I really do like of this book. I like when the preacher, Jesse, he finds out that Cassidy's a vampire. He's like, fuck you, get out of here. Like, get away from me, vampire. You're a fucking asshole. And then, like, the next issue, he's like, maybe I was too hard on him. Like, you know, like,
I like that.
And like Cassidy was like, that was kind of fucked up, like how I just ate that dude in front of him. I think tempers were a little high now. I bet we should still be friends. And then they get back together like, sorry about that, man. Sorry about that. Like, it's not something that, like, sticks. And I feel like, it's like, we calm down. We like each other. Let's still be friends. We don't have to destroy our friendship over this. I thought that like felt like a weird real moment, because it didn't feel like a normal movies moment where it's like they're gonna be enemies forever until he like wins him over. It's like, I'm sorry, it's cool.
We're cool. You helped me out earlier. We're all right. I like the part where Cassidy is about to get found by the cops in the apartment, and he just like, all right, well shit, and he stabs himself in the neck with a knife and plays dead until he can wake up in the morgue.
Because the cops are the cops. Yeah, that's awesome. Because the cops found him during the daytime. He's like, well, I can't leave this house, and I can't go out guns a-blazing, so I'll just fake like I'm dead. That's cool, right?
Yeah. I actually really like Cassidy, and I think Tulip is okay. And then it's like Custer. Like, I just can't stand this character.
Yeah, so I don't know. Hopefully, maybe we'll check the TV show out, and we'll talk some more about this at some point. I think for sure, after having, the premise is, again, interesting enough for me to be interested in the TV show. So maybe I'll read some more Preacher, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just bail and jump onto the TV show. We'll see.
So I think the book gets a little better once you start get your bearings. I think the idea, and I don't even know if we really talked about this, is the truth is that God has abdicated the throne. Like,
we did. We kind of skipped over that. That's the reason everything's in turmoil.
Which is a really cool concept. And like, if you're thinking of real world, like, why do bad things happen to good people? And like, why is the world so shitty? It's like, maybe God just left. Maybe God just quit. Yeah. Is an interesting concept that I hadn't. Maybe it's been told several times, but Preacher was the first time I'd ever heard that concept. And so I was like, that's an interesting perspective on the character of God. Somebody's just fuck it, I left.
This I like parts of this book, and it must have been a good enough book that it lasted 5 years. It was around for 5 years. They made some 70 issues or whatever.
It has an ending.
Plus the spinoff.
Yeah, it sounds like he wasn't forced out either. He kind of got to finish his own story, right?
But honestly, it feels like to me, and I think we already kind of touched on it. It feels like a dumbed down, or like a supernatural, like a pre-supernatural.
Yeah,
like
proto-supernatural.
These characters,
yeah.
They basically took this model, and then instead of it being Cassidy and Jesse, let's just make them brothers. And then here are the the intermingling here's who they mingle with. They mingle with angels. They mingle with demons. They mingle with all the motherfuckers on the in between.
Yeah.
Ostensibly, that's what this book feels like. And having, I mean, I don't know. I think we're in like season, 15 of Supernatural or something.
It's 12 or 13 now, but.
Vince, do you still watch that show?
I haven't watched past season 5. I really liked it though. I got caught up.
Well, air quotes, caught up most recently on it, and a lot of what transpires in this book, I'm like, oh shit, you know, like that. You remember that South Park where the Simpsons did it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's what I felt like when I was reading this book. I was like, oh, Supernatural did this.
Yep. Every single plot line from Hellblazer and Preacher is pretty much straight up ripped off for Supernatural. And I feel like Supernatural did it better, which makes me mildly intrigued to think that maybe Preacher, the TV show, does this better than the book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think, and that's what I'm thinking. I might just have to get off the book and start with the show.
Yeah. Because they really linger in the town for, I think, all of season 1 is based in this Texas town. And I really, Kia, you mentioned it. I thought it was really stupid that the second arc is in New York. And it's like, especially they seed that Jesse's grandmother or whatever is in like Beaumont or somewhere in East Texas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
that's going to be a storyline. So it's like, you're going to have to go back down there?
Yeah, literally at the end of that 7th issue, they say, all right, well, she's got some business in Dallas. My grandma's in Texas, so we're going back. And I'm like, what? Why were we in New York? What's going on here? All right.
Yeah, they could have gone to literally any. They could have gone to New Orleans to.
Yeah, that story was not like New York specific in that like it had to be in New York. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But I guess geography often doesn't matter in comics. So
yeah.
So you can get anywhere as fast as you want.
It's a Brit whose impression of Texas is clearly based on like the 1970s, apparently, because Houston looked like Midnight Cowboy or whatever. Like for the one scene it's in, it's like, what is this?
Wait, what scene was Houston in? I don't remember seeing that.
The last, the issue 4, I think it was the end of the first arc. They're like, yeah, we went through, like, I guess, changed cars or whatever and, like, hitchhiked and got to Houston. And they just show, like, a truck stop.
Oh, that diner that they're all sitting in. Yeah, the thing that this whole flashback is. Yeah, they're just, like, you don't see nothing. Man, they don't, Garth Ennis doesn't know what
Houston known for its barren wastes.
No industry there whatsoever. Nope.
Maybe once upon a time. Maybe in the early 90s.
No, maybe he meant he was in Flatonia or Schulenburg or
maybe.
You know, honestly, if we didn't have the New York storyline, you could probably read these first 4 issues and think that they took place in, like, I don't know, the 1960s for sure. I don't see any reason why they couldn't have been.
It's very
other than name dropping Nirvana and calling them queers or whatever.
Yeah, and the FAGGOTs, yeah.
So yeah, I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that probably not going to finish Preacher. I might read a little bit more because I am kind of curious, but I don't know. I don't think I have the time for it.
I'm more curious for the TV show now. I'm more on board.
I'm curious for the TV show.
Yeah, same.
So I think we're all. That's how we're judging this. We'll watch the TV show.
Well, I think based on this, based on having the conversation with like-minded nerds, that I'm more inclined to jump into the TV show now than I am to continue. Actually, I would recommend, if you haven't picked. I started because I feel like you guys were talking about doing this the Preacher podcast for a while.
Right.
At least we had spoken about it a few times before, Kia, and I remember jumping into Preacher back then. But I had started I started reading the Saint of Killers books.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I've never read those at all.
That's like in volume 3 or 4 of the collected editions.
Right.
All right.
I found those books more compelling than the first book of, say, Preacher 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it's long. It's a lot of really long text bubbles because it's kind of like giving the his origin story, basically. You get the origin of how the Saint of Killers comes to be buried under a hill, in the first Preacher book. You kind of get his arc in that way. And I found those books more compelling than 1 through 4 of, say, Preacher.
Yeah, all right. Well, how about this? If we come back and revisit Preacher, we won't do it with the main series. We'll do it with the Saint of Killers, and then we'll be able to talk about the TV show as well. Then, how about that? I think that'd be a good plan to continue with. But I think on that note, it sounds like we're gonna close the book on Preacher here for this episode. Anyone have anything else they want to say real quick?
I did.
Yeah,
all right.
No, go ahead, Chris. You go first.
I was going to say that you can really tell that Garth Ennis is like 24 when he's writing this book, because this book, it's the same thing that Troy Duffy did in Boondock Saints and stuff like that. It's such a like, this is what like a 22-year-old thinks is cool, which is all like vampires and people no selling being shot.
That's right. People get shot and then literally don't move. And it's supposed to be like, I don't know, a comedy thing, but it just looks weird when it happens.
It happens to like 3 different characters too. It's like this isn't even that cool anymore. Everyone's doing it.
I can't wait till I get shot. I'm just gonna not move, and I'm gonna be so cool. Vince, what were you gonna say?
I'm gonna turn my gun sideways and then like do a rosary or something. It's gonna be awesome.
So, Chris, I have a question, and it's about Steve Dillon, who the artist who passed away last year. But I've always heard Steve Dillon's a good artist, but I've never really liked his art. But I always like his books he does. So my question to you is Steve Dillon a good artist? I don't like his style, but maybe like his like sequencing is really good, and the way he tells stories is. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think his framing is really good. He can draw very expressively, but at the same time, like especially when he has to draw someone other than Custer, his ability to draw faces where he's not just referencing something is not good. Like he can draw one face, and then he's like, "Well, I can't draw this again, so I'm gonna draw something." So like with Punisher,
all his faces look so samey.
Yeah, with Punisher, he's like, "Okay, here's the Punisher face," and then every other face is like, "Well, I don't know. It can't look too much like him."
Yeah, I
feel like his females often look like male characters way too often because he just kind of only knows how to draw that one face. But everything else about him, I really like.
He draws blood and guts pretty well, I think. But I don't know. I like all of his books that he's ever done, but I was like, I don't like the style. Like the line work is weird to me, but I like the books he's done, so it's confusing to me.
I found it very reminiscent of parts of Sandman. In fact,
Really?
there was parts of it I was like, huh. Because initially I didn't like Sandman for that reason. It took me a long time to even read Sandman because I would pick it up, periodically from time to time and just flip through before I actually got into reading it. And I'm just like, I'm one of those like if I can't be pulled in with just a couple panels of the artwork, it's very rare that I'll like pick up the book to read it. And that's what I felt like. That's what I felt like this book kind of suffered from, or it could have suffered from in that way because a lot of this artwork kind of reminded me of that kind of weird style that Sandman had. Some of those illustrations.
I think I like him overall because he's kind of like a neat, clean, crisp artist where everything's laid out nicely and everything like you can kind of tell what's going on in a very nice-ish way, but it also kind of sometimes looks too clean and too crisp for what he's trying to portray. Hence a lot of the like people not moving right afterwards. Like everything's just like, all right, that jaw just like tore off clean like that, and like little things like that, which are a little strange for me. But I mean, overall, I don't find his art offensive or anything. It's like, okay, he gets the job done, and I can always tell when it's Steve Dillon art compared to someone else. And I think in the end, that's a good thing. All right, Vince, weren't you literally on the last episode talking about how you had a hard time getting into Sandman for the art as well?
Yep, it's really that Sam Keith art sucks. It sucks.
That's going a little far.
Well, I mean, when you look at Sandman as a canon of books, not all of it sucks. There's some of it that is like psychedelic and super dope and reminiscent of like those like late 80s Marvel Comics circa like the Nick Furies of that time. Really kind of cool. But there was a good, maybe I'd say a third of the artwork that was just shit. Like like it was done by like a kindergartner or like a first grader. At least that's what it felt like. Like in some of those like early issues, I was like, why do people hold this book in such high regard? These panels are shit. And then it wasn't so like the actual reading of those panels. I was like, oh, this makes sense why they're like shit. Okay. It made sense in that way, like because of who the character was. This dream, this amorphous kind of like ethereal character. Some of these panels were kind of like that, like as if they existed in like a dream, or if you had a dream and tried to wake up and then draw that dream. Some of these panels kind of invoke that thing, and I gained an appreciation for how ugly it was.
Yeah. All right.
And it's, I mean, it's not, it's a little similar to when a, Star Wars franchise or whatever gives a movie to someone who's only ever made, like indie dramedy type movies with no budget.
Safety not guaranteed?
Where it's like these guys aren't the ones that have, they haven't learned to draw comics like the Marvel way, you know. So they don't draw it exactly the same way as what you're used to. So it's like on the one hand, like, some of the people, it's just bad. Like the page to page, you're like, whew, that's ugly. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's partially because they haven't kind of learned to do everything the same way. So you'll also see like structure that like, oh, this is different. Like it's just kind of its own thing that's a little different than kind of mainstream superhero comics to that point.
Word.
Yeah. Well, great. This sparked some really interesting discussion. So, man, Rob, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a blast. Hope we can have you on again here. Vince, Chris, thank you. We got to talk about next time. Yep. Next time on the show. Boy, that Spider-Man movie is out. Everybody's talking about it.
Everybody's talking about it. It was good.
So, we're gonna talk about some of the Sinister 6 stuff that seems to be getting spin up. Yeah. We're gonna read some classic Sinister 6 stories. We're gonna read The Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1, which is from somewhere in the 60s.
1964.
64?
1964. Wow. Dr. Octopus is sick of getting jobbed out, so he teams up with all the other Spider-Man villains from, I guess, the first year of Spider-Man.
That's classic.
Good for him. Yeah, makes sense. But then we're going to jump to something a little bit more modern. We're going to do Amazing Spider-Man 334 to 339.
Which is only 25 years old.
Only.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still pretty old. But by David Michelin and Eric Larson. We read some Venom issues that they did just a few weeks ago. So we're going to read that as sort of one of the classic Sinister 6 team-ups there. I hope they're pretty good. We liked the last stuff we read of Michelin and Larson, didn't we?
It was Michelin and McFarlane.
Well, yeah. Oh, that's right. It was McFarlane. I always get Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson mixed up sometimes. I'm sorry. Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson. I'll send you each a beautiful gift basket here.
They're doing quite well with their founding of Image. They're doing quite well.
Okay. I was worried. All right. Maybe I won't send them a gift basket. But everybody else out there, thank you so much for listening. We hope to have you join us next time for that. We love you so much. Thank you. Good night. Bye.